some of them mimic existing rituals. So the very fact that they exist on a program device means that they involve a sort of scripted experience that in some ways mimics the liturgy that we're already familiar with, right? So people can, walk along with experiences that are familiar to them. But the problem is that when they get to the point where they may need a religious official present, they may choose to use just the mobile device instead. But there's a really intriguing kinship there between what programmed devices can do compared with what rituals as sort of a religious programmed experience can do. But there are other forms of apps that do things that are quite new for our century. There are some that give us sacred texts in sort of formats with which we might not be familiar, very accessible, very searchable, and anyone can get hold of them. There's that. There are also prayer apps where people can interact and pray for people that they may never have met, so it can create a new sense of community. And there are also social media apps that are used by groups that can pull people into contemporary worship, help them locate it, and also help them connect with people from their own religious groups that they may otherwise never meet. So if you're part of a minority religious group, it may enable you to easily find people who share your perspectives. And that sort of ease, I think, is something that's very new in the 21st century. All around us, we have computers that we interact with, and these programs can lead us through things in ways that actually may even be more accurate in terms of the wording and the timing than a real-life experience. And so if what people want is to be led through a particular experience, then yes. And if that's a problem for people, then yes, there is a danger that people might do this. And I think that religious officials are worried because I think that they do, many of them, see something as crucial about embodied engagement. And so if you define community as requiring the presence of an actual physical body, then there is a real danger of these kinds of new forms of community. But if it's a matter of investment, a matter of locating like-minded people, and a matter of experiencing a sense of belonging, then it's certainly possible within virtual context for people to have that sense of community even without their physical bodies present. Rituals are, as I said, sort of scripted experiences that invite us into a time and space that is separate from our ordinary lives. This is something that game theorists call the magic circle. Well, ritual theorists similarly talk about carving out a space and time from ordinary life in which experiences can happen with rules that are meant to shape, how we see ourselves and how we see the cosmos. And so there's a similarity in terms of sort of setting apart this time to have particular kinds of things happen. And if one of the things that happens there also involves a depiction of sacred space within a virtual context, then a whole host of new questions emerge. In the online world of Second Life, for example, there are people who attend synagogue and mosque and church. There's a perfect replica of Mecca in Second Life. And people can go to these spaces, and some people go there and feel like they have an authentic religious experience because they see that sacred space as equally authentic to physical sacred space because they feel the things they want to feel, and they see it sort of gesturing towards the heavenly realm in the same way that a physical building might. But in the Resistance Fall of Man game, there's a portrayal of Manchester Cathedral that, like you said, involves a shootout of aliens. And because it's a perfect replica of the physical cathedral, the officials there were quite upset because they noticed that there was this sacred time, the sacred space, the space of the cathedral that was carved out within a gated space, and there was violence happening there. And for them, that virtual space, even though it was in the context of a fantasy game, was still gesturing towards heaven. And they worried that the activities that people engaged in the cathedral might then be imitated in the real life cathedral. And actually, if you look at some of the foundational religious stories around the world, you actually do find a measure of violence in many of them. Think of the Bhagavad Gita, and the battles that take place there. Think of the story of Passover and the things that happen there. Think of the crucifixion. There are also stories of battles in the Quran. So dealing with stories that involve violence is something that religions have done for a long time. And I think that we find a comfort in structures of order that give us a sense of how to understand ourselves in the world. And one of the things that happens especially in first-person shooters, is that you often have forces of good against forces of evil. The player often has a sort of quasi-messianic function. They have to destroy all the forces of evil. And I actually have begun to wonder if in 21st century culture, with the movement of people from around the world, with the encounter of all different sorts of belief systems, with the demise in many places of institutionalized religious structures, if people may be turning to video games for a sort of temporary respite, a temporary enter into a space where there are decipherable rules, where there are forces of good, where there are forces of evil. And that sort of inhabitation of a space of order is actually something that traditional religion also provides. And of course, the difficult question comes that we enter temporarily into video game worlds, but most people enter permanently into sort of religiously structured worlds.